Okay. Do I have sound again? Okay, now I do. All right. So I tried to do this last night at my normal time and read for quite a while before somebody said, "Hey, I can't hear you." Um, OBS said I had sound, everything looked good, and I actually didn't have sound. So I don't know what the hell was going on with that. Some weird setting somewhere that showed it here, but not actually recording the audio. So whatever. So I'm going to redo chapter 8 of Zecharia Sitchin, The Stairway to Heaven, second book in the Earth Chronicles. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So this one is chapter 8, Riders of the Clouds. The journey of Gilgamesh in search of immortality has undoubtedly been the fountainhead of many tales in subsequent millennia of demigods or heroes claiming such a status, who have likewise gone to search for paradise on earth or to reach the celestial abode of the gods. Without question, the detailed Epic of Gilgamesh also served as a guidebook in which the subsequent searchers sought to find the ancient landmarks by which the land of the living could be reached and the way to it ascertained. The similarities between the geographic landmarks, the man made or rather the God made tunnels, corridors, airlocks, and radiation chambers, and the bird like beings or eagles, as well as many other major and minor details, are far too numerous and identical to be mere coincidences. At the same time, the epic tale of the journey can explain the confusion that reigned millennia later concerning the exact location of the cherished target, because as our detailed analysis has shown, Gilgamesh made not one but two journeys, a fact generally ignored by modern scholars and possibly also by past ones. The Gilgamesh drama reached its culmination in the land of Tilman, an abode of the gods and a place of the Shetans. That's spelled Shetns. So I don't know how to pronounce that. It was there that he encountered an ancestor who had escaped mortality and had found the secret plant of eternal youth. It was there that other divine encounters, as well as events affecting the course of human history, occurred in later millennia. It was there, we believe, that the Duat was, the stairway to heaven. But that was not the first destination of Gilgamesh, and we ought to follow in his footsteps in the same sequence by which he himself had embarked on his journey. His first destination on the road to immortality was not Tilman, but the landing place on the Cedar Mountain within the great cedar forest. Scholars, e.g., S.N. Kramer in the Sumerians, have termed as quote unquote cryptic and still enigmatic Sumerian statements that Shamash could rise in the Cedar Land and not only in Tilman. The answer is that apart from the spaceport at Tilman, from which the farthest heavens could be reached, there was also a landing place from which the gods uh, could scale the skies of Earth. This realization is supported by our conclusion that the gods indeed had two types of craft: the GIRs, the rocket ships that were operated from Tilman, and what the Sumerians called a mu, that's MU, a sky chamber. It is a credit to the technology of the Nephilim that the uppermost section of the GIR, the command module, what the Egyptians called Benben, could be detached and fly in Earth's skies as a mu. The ancient peoples had seen the GIRs in their silos, figure 27, or even in flight, figure 75. So, figure 27 is way back in the book. I'm not going to go back to it. I've already shown it. Figure 75 will be coming up. But they depicted more frequently the sky chambers, vehicles which would nowadays classify as UFOs, unidentified flying objects. The one the patriarch Jacob had seen in his vision might well have looked like the sky chamber of Ishtar, which is in figure 46, or I'm sorry, 66, that's already passed. The flying wheel described by the prophet Ezekiel was akin to the Assyrian depictions of their flying god roaming the skies at cloud level within a spherical chamber, figure 76a. Depictions found at an ancient site across the Jordan from Jericho suggest that for landing, these spherical vehicles extended 3 legs, figure 76b. They could well have been the fiery whirlwinds in which the prophet Elijah was carried off heavenwards at that very same location. Okay, so we've got figure 75, 76, and 76a, or 76a and b, I should say. So let me show you those. Okay, so 75, here we go. And this is the part I think that he's talking about, this flying object in the sky. And then you go to, this is supposed to be the spherical flying machine, and supposedly the landing, putting out these 3 legs. As the Sumerian eagles, as what? As the Sumerian eagles, so were the flying gods of antiquity depicted by all ancient peoples as gods equipped with wings, the winged beings to whose depictions we can trace the Judeo-Christian acceptance of the winged cherubim and angels, literally emissaries of the Lord, figure 77. Tillman, then, was the location of the spaceport. The Cedar Mountain was the location of the landing place. The crossroads of Ishtar, the airport of the gods. And it was to the latter that Gilgamesh had first set his course. While the identification of Tillman and its location is no mean challenge, there is little problem in locating the cedar forest. With the exception of a subsidiary growth on the island of Cyprus, there is only one such location throughout the Near East, the mountains of Lebanon. These majestic cedar trees, which can reach 150 feet in height, were repeatedly extolled in the Bible, and their uniqueness was known to the ancient peoples from the earliest times. As the biblical and other Near Eastern texts attest, the cedars of Lebanon were earmarked for the construction and decoration of temples, God's houses. A practice described in detail in 1 Kings. In the chapters detailing dealing with the building of the Jerusalem temple by Solomon, after the Lord Yahweh had complained, "Why build ye not me a house of cedar?" The biblical Lord appears to have been quite familiar with the cedars and frequently employed them in his allegories, comparing rulers or nations to cedars. Quote, "Assyria was a cedar in Lebanon with fair branches and a shadowing shroud and of high stature. Waters nourished it, subterranean streams gave it height." End quote. Until the wrath of Yahweh toppled it and smashed its branches. Man, it appears, had never been able to cultivate these cedars, and the Bible records an attempt that had completely failed. Attributing the attempt to the king of Babylon, factually or allegorically, it is stated that, quote, "He came to Lebanon and took the cedar's highest branch," end quote. Selecting off it a choice seed. This seed, quote, "he planted in a fruitful field, he placed it by great waters," end quote. But what grew up was not a tall cedar, only a willow-like tree, quote, "a spreading vine of low stature," end quote. The biblical Lord, on the other hand, knew the secret of cedar cultivation. Quote, "Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, from the cedar's crest, from its topmost branches, a tender shoot I will take, and I will plant it upon a high and steep mountain, and it will put forth branches and bear fruit, and become a mighty cedar." End quote. This knowledge apparently stemmed from the fact that the cedar grew in the quote-unquote orchard of the gods. There no other tree could match it. Quote, "It was the envy of all the trees that were in Eden, the garden of the gods." End quote. The Hebrew term gan, G-A-N, orchard or garden, stemming as it does from the root G-N-N, protect or guard, conveys the sense of a guarded and restricted area, the same sense as it imparted to the reader of the Gilgamesh narrative, a forest that extends for many leagues, watched over by a fiery warrior, a terror to mortals, accessible only through a gateway which paralyzed the intruder who touched it. Inside there was, quote, "the secret abode of the Anunnaki," end quote. A tunnel led to, God, that's annoying. Quote, the enclosure from which words of command are issued, the underground place of Shamash, end quote. If you haven't guessed by now, I hate multiple quotes in a row. Okay, so backing up a little bit, Figure 77 was the depictions of various winged deities, angels, whatever they're supposed to be. So I'll show you that. There are a number of them here. All of these winged beings from different cultures. Gilgamesh almost made it to the landing place, for he had the permission and help of Shamash, but the wrath of Ishtar, when he turned down her advances, completely reversed the course of events. Not so, according to the Old Testament, was the fate of another king. Okay. He was the king of Tyre. That's how I've heard it pronounced, Tyre, Tyre. A city-state on the coast of Lebanon, a short distance away from the Cedar Mountains, and the deity, as told in chapter 28 of the book of Ezekiel, did enable him to visit the sacred mountain. Quote, thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy thicket. Thou art an anointed cherub, protected, and I have placed thee in the sacred mountain. As a god wouldst thou moving within the fiery stones. End quote. I think. Yeah. And then the next, I found this out last night when I was trying to do the reading the first time. He has no reference at all to Figure 78. It's just a map of the eastern part of the Mediterranean and the surrounding land. So I'm just going to show that now. So up here we have the land of the Hittites. Cyprus is this island here. Um, and that looks like it says the land of Amuru. I can't quite make it out. It's a little bit fuzzy there. Um, Kadash, Damascus is here. Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea is here. Jericho is here. Of course, here you have the Nile Delta and the Nile, Memphis, and the Sinai Peninsula, and all of that stuff. The Red Sea, of course. So, like I said, he doesn't refer to it in the text. So, I don't know. Anyway, moving on with the reading. Gilgamesh sought to enter the landing place of the gods uninvited. The king of Tyre was not only was permitted to come to the place, but evidently was also given a ride in quote unquote the fiery stones, playing as a cherub. As a result, quote, a god I am, he said, in the abode of the deity I sat in the midst of the waters, end quote. For his haughtiness of heart, the prophet was to inform him he was to die the death of the heathen by the hands of strangers. Both of the Hebrews both the Hebrews of biblical times and their neighbors to the north were thus acquainted with the location and nature of the landing place in the Cedar Mountain, which Gilgamesh attempted to penetrate in a previous millennium. It was, as we shall show, not a mythological place, but a real one. Not only text but also pictorial depictions exist from those ancient days, attesting to the existence and functions of the place. In the tale of the king who tried to grow a cedar, the Old Testament reports that he, quote, carried off the twig to a land of commerce, end quote, and planted the seed, quote unquote, in a city of merchants. Such a land and such cities of merchants need not have been looked for far. Along the coast of Lebanon, from where Anatolia begins in the north to Palestine in the south, there were several Canaanite coastal cities whose wealth and power grew with their international commerce. Best known for their from the biblical narratives were Tyre and Sidon. I guess that's how you pronounce that. That's Sidon. Centers of trade and shipping for millennia. Their fame reached in its peak under their Phoenician rulers. In ruins and buried under a mount since its destruction by Assyrian invaders lay yet another city, perhaps the northernmost outpost of the Canaanites at the borders of the Hittite Empire. Its remains were accidentally uncovered in 1928 by a farmer who set out to plow a new field near the mount called Ras Shamra. The extensive excavations that followed uncovered the ancient city of uh, Ugarit, Ugarit. The spectacular finds included a large palace, a temple to the god Baal, the Lord, quote unquote, and a variety of artifacts, but the real treasures were scores of clay tablets inscribed in an alphabetical cuneiform script, figure 79, written in a Western Semitic language akin to Biblical Hebrew. The tablets whose contents were first presented by Charles Virolaud over many years in the scientific periodical Syria, retrieved from relative obscurity the Canaanites, their life and customs, and their gods. At the head of the Canaanite pantheon was a supreme deity called El, E-L, a term which in biblical Hebrew was the generic term for deity, stemming as it did from the Akkadian word Ilu, or Ilu, I guess, I-L-U, which literally meant lofty one. But in the Canaanite tales of gods and men, El was the personal name of an actual deity who was the final authority in all affairs, be they divine or human. He was father of the gods as well as Ab Adam, father of men. His epithets were the kindly, the merciful. He was, quote unquote, creator of things created, and the, quote unquote, one of who, I'm sorry, I screwed up the quote. One who alone could bestow kingship, end quote. A stela found in Palestine, figure 80, depicts El seated on his throne and being served a beverage by a younger deity, probably one of his many sons. El wears the conical horned headdress, which was the recognition mark of the gods throughout the ancient Near East, and the scene is dominated by the omnipresent winged globe, emblem of the planet of the gods. Okay, so let me show you 79 and 80. 79 is this Western Semitic cuneiform script. And then this is the one he was just talking about, figure 80, where El is seated, being served, and there's the winged globe right up here at the top. In olden times, El was a principal deity of heaven and earth, but at the time at which the events related in the tablets had taken place, El lived in semi-retirement, aloof from daily affairs. His abode was in the mountains at the two headwaters, quote unquote. There he sat in his pavilion, receiving emissaries, holding councils of the gods, and trying to resolve the recurring disputes among the younger gods. Many of these were his own children. Some texts suggest that El may have had 70 offspring. Of them, 30 were by his official consort, Asherah, figure 81. The others by an assortment of concubines or even human females. One poetic text tells how two females saw El naked as they were strolling on the beach. They were completely charmed by the size of his penis and ended up each bearing him a son. This attribute of El is prominent in a depiction of him as a winged god on a Phoenician coin, figure 82. So figure 81, I'll show you, is Asherah, his official consort, and then 82, they're talking about this coin, or he's talking about this coin, but he doesn't actually mention what these two depictions are in the text anywhere. So he's just talking about the coin. El's principal children, however, were three sons and one daughter. The gods Yam, which means ocean or sea, Baal, meaning Lord, and Mot, meaning smiter or annihilator, and the goddess Anat, she who responded. In names and relationships, They clearly paralleled the Greek gods Poseidon, god of the seas, Zeus, lord of the gods, and Hades, god of the lower world. Baal, as Zeus, was always armed with a lightning missile, figure 82. Oh, that's where 82 comes in. I was mistaken. I forgot about this. Um, figure 82. The bull, his cult symbol. When Zeus fought Typhon, it was his sister Athena, goddess of war and love, who alone stood by him. And in Egyptian tales, Isis alone stood by her brother husband Osiris. So it was when Baal fought his two brothers, his sister lover Anat alone came to his help. Like Athena, she was on the one hand the maiden, often flaunting her naked beauty, and on the other hand the goddess of war, the lion, a symbol of her bravery. Okay, so going back to 82 then, where I misspoke, it is here. This would be um, Baal with his uh, lightning, and then this would be, what was her name? I've already forgotten her name. Anat. Anat with her lion symbol and showing off her nudity, her nakedness. So, okay, back to it. Blah, blah, blah. The Old Testament called her Astaroth. So, Anat is called Astoreth, I'm sorry, in the Old Testament. The links to Egyptian prehistorical collections and beliefs were no less obvious than to those of Greece. Osiris was resurrected by Isis after she had found his remains in the, and he has it as Gananite in this, written in this section. I remember that from the first time through. I don't know if that's a typo. He does it like 3 or 4 times, or was Gananite some other? Um, I don't know. I am not familiar with that. So if somebody knows, let me know in the comments. She found his remains at the Gananite city of Byblos. Likewise, Baal was brought back to life by Anat after he was smitten by Mot. Seth, the adversary of Osiris, was sometimes called in Egyptian writings Seth of Saphon. Baal, as we shall see, acquired the title Lord of Zaphon, with Z. Egyptian monuments of the New Kingdom, paralleling the Gananite period, often depicted the Gananite gods as Egyptian deities, calling them Min, Reshef, Kadesh, and That. That's figure 84, which we'll get to here in a minute. We thus find the same tales applying to the same gods but under different names throughout the ancient worlds. Let's see how far ahead. Okay, we've got 83, and there's 84. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you those. So 83, as a reminder, was this is a depiction of Anat as goddess of war. So that's Anat as goddess of war, and then down here we have the all of the gods. There she is as the maiden again, but then the other gods that he was just talking about. So the the Gananite gods as Egyptian deities. Scholars have pointed out that all these tales were echoes, if not actual versions, of the same earlier and original Sumerian tales, not only of man's search for immortality, but also of love, death, and resurrection among the gods. All along, the tales were replete with episodes, details, epithets, and teachings which also fill the Old Testament, attesting to a common locale, Greater Canaan, common traditions, and common original versions. One such text is the tale of Danel, El's judge, Daniel in Hebrew. A righteous chieftain who could not beget a rightful heir. He appealed to the gods to give him one, so that when he died, the son could erect a stela in his memory at Kadesh. From this, we surmise that the area of the tale's events was where southern Canaan, the Negev, that's Negev, merges into the Sinai Peninsula, for it was there that Kadesh, the sacred city, was located. Kadesh was encompassed in the territory of the biblical patriarch Abraham, and the Canaanite tale of Daniel is indeed replete with similarities to the biblical tale of the birth of Isaac to the aging Abraham and Sarah. Much as in the book of Genesis, we read in the Canaanite tale that Daniel, getting on in years without a male heir, saw his chance to get divine help when two gods arrived at his habitat. Quote, forthwith he gives offering to the gods to eat, gives offering to drink to the holy ones. End quote. The divine guests, who turn out to be El, the dispenser of healing, quote unquote, and Baal, stay with Daniel a whole week, during which he overwhelms them with his supplications. Finally, Baal, quote, approaches El with his Daniel's plea. End quote. Yielding, El, quote, by the hand takes his servant and grants him spirit, end quote, whereby Daniel's virility is restored. Quote, with life breath Daniel is quickened, with life breath he is invigorated, end quote. To the disbelieving Daniel, El promises a son. Mount your bed, he tells him, kiss your wife, embrace her. Quote, by conception and pregnancy she will bear a male child to Daniel. End quote. And just as in the biblical tale, the matriarch does bear a rightful heir and the succession is assured. They name him Akat, that's Aqhat. The gods nickname him Naaman, the pleasant one. That's Na'Aman. As the boys grow As the boy grows to be a young man, the craftsman of the gods presents him with a gift of a unique bow. This soon arouses the envy of Anat, who wishes to possess the magical bow. To get it, she promises Akat anything he would like to have: silver, gold, even immortality. Quote, ask for life, O Akat the youth. Ask for life, and I will grant it to thee. For immortality ask, and I will bestow it upon thee. With Baal I will make thee count the years. With the sons of El shalt thou count the months. End quote. Moreover, she promised not only would he live as long as the gods, but he would be invited to join them for the life-giving ceremony. Quote, and Baal, when he grants life, a feast he gives, a banquet he holds for the one given life. He bids him a drink, sings and chants over him sweetly. End quote. But Akat does not believe that man can escape his mortal fate, and does not wish to part with the bow. Quote, lie not, O maiden, to a hero thy lies are loathsome. How can a mortal an afterlife acquire? How can a mortal eternity obtain? The death of all men will I die, yea, I shall surely die. End quote. He also points out to Anat that the bow was made for warriors like himself and not for a female to use. Insulted, Anat traverses the land to El's abode to seek permission to smite Akat. El's enigmatic response permits punishment only up to a point. Now Anat turns to cunning. Quote, over 1,000 fields, 10,000 acres, end quote, she travels back to Akat, pretending to be at peace and in love with him, and laughs and giggles, addressing him as Akat the youth. She states, quote, thou art my brother, I am thy sister, end quote. She persuades him to accompany her to the city of, quote, the father of the gods, the lord of the moon, end quote. There she asks Typhon to, quote, slay Akat for his bow, but then make him alive again, end quote, to put Akat to temporary death, only long enough for Anat to take away his bow. Typhon, following Anat's instructions, quote, smites Akat twice on the skull, thrice above the ear, end quote, and Akat's, quote unquote, soul escapes like vapor. I hate all these quotes. God, just write it out. I hate the quotes. I know, it wasn't meant for reading out loud. That's why there are so many. But anyway, it's annoying. But before Akkad can be revived, if Anat had ever so intended, his body is ravaged by vultures. The terrible news is brought to Danel as, quote, sitting before the gate under a mighty tree, he judges the cause of the widow, adjudicates the cause of the orphan, end quote. With Baal's aid, a search is instituted for the dismembered Akkad, but to no avail. In revenge, Akkad's sister, in disguise, travels to the abode of Tafan and, getting him drunk, attempts to slay him. A possible happy end where Akkad was resurrected after all is missing. A transfer of action from the mountains of Lebanon to the quote-unquote city of Lord Moon is also an element found in the Gilgamesh epic. Throughout the ancient Near East, the deity associated with the moon was Sin, spelled just like it sounds, Sin. Nanar in the original Sumerian, which is Nannar. This Ugaritic epithet was father of, or his Ugaritic epithet was father of gods. He indeed was the father of Ishtar and her brothers. The first attempt of Gilgamesh to reach his goal via the landing place in the Cedar Mountain was frustrated by Ishtar, who sought to have him killed by the Bull of Heaven after he rejected her advances. Undertaking the second journey toward the land Tilman, Gilgamesh too arrived at a walled city, quote, whose temple to Sin was dedicated, end quote. But whereas Gilgamesh arrived in the region of Sin after a long and hazardous trek, Anat, like Ishtar, could get around from place to place in no time, for she neither walked nor traveled on ass back. Instead, she flew from place to place. Many Mesopotamian texts referred to Ishtar's flying journeys and her ability to roam in Earth's skies, quote, crossing heaven, crossing Earth, end quote. A depiction of her in her temple in Ashur, an Assyrian capital, showed her wearing goggles, a tight-fitting helmet, and extended, quote, earphones or panels. See figure 58, which is way back. I'm not going to go back to it. In the ruins of Mari on the Euphrates River, a life-size statue of a goddess was found equipped with a quote-unquote black box, a hose, a horned helmet with built-in earphones and other attributes of an aeronaut. Figure 85 coming up here. This ability as a bird to fly, also attributed to the Canaanite deities, features in all the epic tales discovered at Ugarit. Okay, is 85 right here? Yes, it is. Okay, figure 85. I kind of see what he's talking about. I don't really see goggles, but I see what he's kind of trying to call earphones on this back view. The horns I see, I don't know if that I would call that a horned helmet, maybe. Um, I don't know. I think in some parts of that he's kind of reaching, but maybe not. Maybe he's right or was right. I think Sitchin died actually. One such tale in which a goddess flies to the rescue is a text titled by scholars, quote, "The Legend of King Carrot," end quote. Carrot is Keret. Carrot being capable of interpretation as the king's personal name or the name of his city, the capital. The tale's main theme is the same as that of the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, man striving for immortality, but it begins like the biblical tale of Job and has other strong biblical similarities. Job, according to the biblical tale, was a righteous and pure man of great wealth and power who lived in the land of Uz, the land of advice. A tale in the domain of the quote-unquote children of the East. All went well until, quote, one day when the sons of the gods came to present themselves to the Lord. Satan came also among them, end quote. Persuading the Lord to test Job, Satan was permitted to afflict him first with the loss of his children and all his wealth, and then with all manner of sickness. As Job sat mourning and suffering, 3 of his friends came to console him. The book of Job was composed as a record of their discussions concerning matters of life and death and the mysteries of heaven and earth. Bewailing the turn of events, Job longed for the days of yore when he was honored and respected. Quote, "At the gates of Karat in the public square, my seat was at the ready." End quote. In those days, Job reminisced, he believed that, quote, "As the phoenix shall be my days, with my establisher shall I die." End quote. But now, with nothing left and afflicted with illnesses, he felt like dying then and there. The friend who had come from the south reminded him that, quote, "Man is born unto travail, only the son of Resheph can to the heights fly up." End quote. Man was mortal after all, so why this extreme agitation? But Job answered enigmatically that it was not so simple. Quote, "The Lord's essence is within me," he said. "Its radiance feeds my spirit." End quote. Was he disclosing in the hitherto uncomprehended verse that he was of partly divine blood? That, therefore, like Gilgamesh, he had expected to live as long as the ever-rejuvenating phoenix, to die only when his establisher shall die. But now he realized that, quote, "Eternally I shall no longer live, like vapor are my days." End quote. The tale of Karat 2 depicts at first him at first. Why am I screwing it up so bad right now? Sorry. The tale of Karat 2 depicts him at first as a prosperous man who loses in quick succession his wife and children through sickness and war. Quote, he sees his offspring ruined in its entirety, a posterity perishing, end quote, and realizes it is the end of his dynasty. Quote, "Wholly undermined is his throne," end quote. His mourning and grief grow daily. Quote, his bed is soaked by his weeping, end quote. Daily. Daily, quote, he enters the inner chamber, end quote, in the temple and cries to his gods. You can see why it annoys me so much with these quotes. Finally, El descends unto him, quote unquote, to find out, quote, what ails Karat that he weeps, end quote. It is then that the text disclosed that Karat is partly divine, for it was El who had fathered him by a human female. El advises his beloved lad to stop mourning and to remarry, for he would be blessed with a new heir. He is told to wash and make himself presentable and go seek the hand of the daughter of the king of Udum. That's Udum, possibly the biblical Edom. Karat, accompanied by troops and laden with gifts, goes to Udum and does as El had instructed. But the king of Udum turns down all the silver and gold, knowing that Karat, quote, "is the flesh of the father of men," end quote, of divine origins. He asks for a unique dowry. Let the firstborn son that his daughter shall bear Karat also be semi-divine. The decision is, of course, not up to Karat. El, who had given him the marriage counsel to begin with, is not available. Karat therefore sets his steps to the shrine of Asherah and seeks her help. The next scene takes place at the abode of El, where the appeal of Asherah is supported by the younger gods. Quote, "Then came the companies of the gods, and puissant Baal spake up. Now come, O kindly one, El benign, will thou not bless Karat the pure-blooded, nor please the beloved lad of El." End quote. Thus prodded, El consents and blesses Karat, promising him that he shall have 7 sons and several daughters. The firstborn son, El announces, is to be named Yasib, permanent, for indeed he will be granted permanence. This will be achieved because when he is born, not his mother, but rather the goddess Asherah and Anat will suckle him. The theme of a king's child being nursed by a goddess, thereby being granted longer life, was depicted in the art of all the Near Eastern peoples, figure 86. Which is what we have right here, figure 86, the baby nursing with the goddess. Okay. The gods keep their promises, but Keret, growing in wealth and power, forgets his vows. In the manner of the king of Tyre in the prophecies of Ezekiel, his heart grew haughty, and he began to boast to his children about his divine origins. Angered, Asherah afflicted him with a fatal disease. As it became clear that Keret was on the verge of death, his sons were astonished. How can this happen to Keret, a son of, quote, a son of Ale, an offspring of the kindly one, a holy being, end quote. In disbelief, the sons questioned their father, for surely his failed claim to immortality has a bearing on their own lives as well. Quote, in thy life, father, we rejoiced. We exulted in thy not dying. Wilt thou die then, father, like the mortals? End quote. Their father's silence speaks for itself, and now the sons turn to the gods. Quote, how can it be said, a son of El is Keret, an offspring of the kindly one, and a holy being? Shall then a god die, an offspring of the kindly one not live? End quote. Embarrassed, El asks the other gods, quote, who among the gods can remove the sickness, drive out the malady? End quote. 7 times El issued this appeal, but, quote, none among the gods answers him, end quote. In desperation, El appeals to the craftsmen of the gods and his assistants, the crafts goddesses who know all magic. Responding, the, quote, female who removes illness, end quote, the goddess Shatakat, that's Shataqat, takes to the air. Quote, she flies over 100 towns, she flies over a multitude of villages, end quote. Arriving in the house of Keret in the nick of time, she manages to revive him. The tale, though, has no happy end. Since Keret's claim to immortality had proven vain, his firstborn son suggested that Keret abdicate in his favor. Of greater importance to the understanding of ancient events are the several epic tales dealing with the gods themselves. In these, the ability of the gods to fly about is accepted as a matter of course, and their haven in the quote-unquote crest of Zaphon is featured as the aeronaut's resting place. The central figures in these tales are Baal and Anat, the brother-sister, who are also lovers. Baal's frequent epithet is the rider of the clouds, an epithet which the Old Testament has claimed for the Hebrew deity. Anat's own flying capabilities, which became apparent in the tales dealing with the relations between gods and men, are even more highlighted in the tales of the gods themselves. In one such text, Anat is told that Baal went to fish, quote, in the meadow of Samakh, that's Samakh, figure 87. The area happens to still be called by that very name to this day. It is Lake Sumki, Sumkhi, Lake of Fishes, in northern Israel, where the Jordan River begins to flow into the Sea of Galilee, and it is still renowned for its fishes and wildlife. Anat decided to join Baal there. Quote, she raises wing, the maiden Anat, she raises wing and tours about flying to the midst of the meadow of Samakh, which with buffaloes abounds, end quote. Seeing her, Baal signaled her to come down, but Anat began to play hide and seek. Annoyed, Baal asked whether she expects him to, quote unquote, anoint her horns, a love-making expression, while in flight. Unable to find her, Baal took off, quote, and went up in the skies, end quote, unto his throne seat on the crest of Zaphon. The playful Anat soon appeared there too, quote, upon Zaphon in pleasure to be, end quote. So 87, figure 87 is Baal went to fish in the meadow of Samakh. So here we go with that. Assuming Baal is the central figure because he's got a fishing pole and a fish on it. Okay. The idyllic get-together, however, could take place only in later years when the position of Baal as the Prince of Earth and acknowledged master of the northern lands was finally established. Earlier, Baal engaged in life and death struggles with other contenders for the godly throne. The prize of all these fights was a place known as Zararath Zaphon, commonly translated the Heights of Zaphon, but specifically meaning the rocky crest in the north. These bloody struggles for dominion over certain strongholds or lands were compounded by the positioning for succession as the head of the pantheon grew old and semi-retired. Conforming to marriage traditions first reported in the Sumerian writings, El's official consort, Asherah, the ruler's daughter, was his half-sister. This made the first son born by her the rightful heir, but, as had happened before, he was often challenged by the firstborn, a son who chronologically was born first, but by another mother. The fact that Baal, who had at least 3 wives, could not marry his beloved Anat confirms that she was a full rather than a half-sister of his. The Canaanite tales begin at the remote mountainous abode of El, where he secretly bestows the succession upon Prince Yam. The goddess Shepesh, torch of the gods, comes flying to Baal to reveal to him the bad news. Quote, El is overturning the kingship, end quote, she shouts in alarm. Baal is advised to present himself to El and put the dispute before the assembled body, council of the gods. His sisters counsel him to be defiant. Quote, there now be off on your way. Wow, why? This is not difficult. Quote, there now, be off on your way toward the assembled body in the midst of Mount Lala. At the feet of El, do not fall down. Prostrate thyself not until unto the assembled body. Proudly standing, say ye your speech. End quote. Learning of the ploy, Yam sends his own emissaries to the gathered gods to demand that the rebellious Baal be surrendered to him. Quote, the gods were sitting to eat, the holy ones for dinner. Baal was attending upon El, end quote, when the emissaries entered. In the hush that followed, they present Yam's demand to indicate that they meant business. Quote, at El's feet they do not fall down, end quote. They hold their weapons at the ready, quote, eyes that are like a whetted sword flashing a consuming fire, end quote. The gods drop to the ground and take cover. El is willing to yield Baal, but Baal seizes his own weapons and is about to jump the emissaries when his mother restrains him. An emissary bears immunity, she reminds him. As the emissaries return to Yam empty-handed, it is clear that there is no way but for the 2 gods to meet on the battlefield. A goddess, perhaps Anat, conspires with the craftsmen of the gods to provide Baal with 2 divine weapons, the chaser and the thrower, which, quote, swoop like an eagle, end quote. Meeting in combat, Baal overwhelms Yam and is about to smash Yam when the voice of Asherah reaches him. Spare Yam. Yam is allowed to live, but is banished to his maritime domains. In return for sparing Yam, Baal asks Asherah to support his quest for supremacy over the crest of Zaphon. Asherah is resting at a seaside resort, and it is quite reluctantly that she makes the journey to El's abode in a hot and dry place. Arriving thirsty and parched, she puts the problem before him and asks that he decide with wisdom, not emotion. Quote, thou art great indeed and wise, she flatters him. Thy beard's gray hair instructs thee. Wisdom and everlife are thy portion. End quote. Weighing the situation, El agrees. Let Baal be the master of the crest of Zaphon. Let him build his house there. What Baal has in mind, however, is not just an abode. His plans require the services of Kothar Hassis, that's Kothar hyphen Hassis, the skilled and knowing, craftsman of the gods. Not only modern scholars, but even the 1st century Philo of Byblos, quoting earlier Phoenician historians, have compared Kothar Hassis with the Greek divine craftsman Hephaestus, who built the abode of Zeus and Hera. Others find parallels with the Egyptian Thoth, god of art, craft, and magic. Indeed, the Ugaritic texts state that the emissaries sent to fetch Kotharhasis were to look for him in Crete and Egypt. Presumably, it was in those lands that his skills were being employed at that time. When Kotharhasis arrived at Baal's place, the two went over the construction plans. It turned out that Baal desired a two-part structure. One, an Ekhal, that's E apostrophe or a dash Khal, a great house, and the other a Bemtam, Behmtam, commonly translated house, but which literally means a raised platform. There was some disagreement between the two regarding where a funnel-like window, which could open and close in some unusual manner, should be placed. Quote, "Thou shalt heed my words, O Baal," end quote, Kotharhasis insisted. When the structure was completed, Baal was concerned that his wives and children would be hurt. To allay his fears, Kotharhasis ordered that trees of Lebanon, quote, "from Sirion its precious cedars," end quote, be piled up within the structure and started up a fire. For a full week the fire burnt intensely. Silver and gold within it melted down, but the structure itself was neither damaged nor destroyed. The underground silo and raised platform were ready. Losing no time, Baal decided to test the facility. Quote, Baal opened the funnel in the raised platform, the window within the great house. In the clouds, Baal opened rifts. His godly sound Baal discharges. His godly sound convulses the earth. The mountains quake. A tremble are the something in east and west. Earth's mounts reel. End quote. So there's a couple of places where there are words missing, and he just puts four dots actually. As Baal soared skyward, the divine messengers Gapan, Gapan, and Ugar, Ugar, joined him in flight. Quote, "The winged ones, the twain, flock the clouds. Behind Baal, bird-like the twain," end quote, soared above the snow-covered peaks of Zaphon, but with the new facilities, the crest of Zaphon was turned into the, quote, "fastness of Zaphon," end quote. And Mount Lebanon, the white one after its snowy peaks, acquired the epithet Sirion, the armored mountain. Attaining mastery over the fastness of Zaphon, Baal also acquired the title Baal Zaphon. The title simply means Lord of Zaphon, of the northern place, but the original connotation of the term Zaphon was not geographical. It meant both the hidden away and the observation place. Undoubtedly, all these connotations played a role in naming Baal Lord of Zaphon. Now that he had attained these powers and prerogatives, Baal's ambitions grew in scope. Inviting the sons of the gods to a banquet, he demanded fealty and vassalage. Those who disagreed were set upon. Quote, "Baal seizes the sons of Asherah, Rabim he strikes in the back, Dokiam he strikes with a bludgeon," end quote. While some were slaughtered, others escaped. Drunk with power, Baal mocked them. Quote, "Baal's enemies take to the woods. His enemies hide in the side of the mountain. Puissant Baal shouts, 'O enemies of Baal, why do you quake? Why do you run? Why do you hide?' The eye of Baal splinters up. His stretched hand the cedar breaks. His right hand is mighty." Well, I'm not actually sure where that ends. It's kind of not clear. I'm going to say that's the end of the quote. Pursuing his quest for mastery, Baal, with the aid of Anat, battled and annihilated such male adversaries as Lothan the serpent, Shalyat the seven-headed dragon, Atak the bullock, as well as the goddess Hashat, the bitch. That's actually the title, the bitch. We know from the Old Testament that Yahweh, the biblical Lord, was also a bitter adversary of Baal. And as Baal's influence grew among the Israelites when their king married a Canaanite princess, the prophet Elijah arranged a contest between Baal and Yahweh upon Mount Carmel, whatever. When Yahweh prevailed, the 300 priests of Baal were promptly executed. In this adversity, it was for Yahweh that the Old Testament claimed mastery over the crest of Zaphon. Significantly, the claims were made in almost identical language, as Psalm 29 and other verses make clear. Quote, "Give unto Yahweh, O son of the gods, unto Yahweh give homage and supremacy. Give unto the Lord the homage of his Shem. Bow down upon him in his sacred splendor. The sound of the Lord is upon the waters. The Lord of glory thundereth, echoes upon the many waters. His sound is powerful, full of majesty. The sound of the Lord, the cedars breaks. The cedars of Lebanon Yahweh splinters. He makes Lebanon skip as a calf, and Sirion like a young buffalo. His sound from amidst the fiery flames cuts through. The Lord in his great house is glorified." End quote. As Baal in the Canaanite texts, so was the Hebrew deity rider of the clouds, quote unquote. The prophet Isaiah envisioned him flying south toward Egypt, quote, "Riding swiftly upon a cloud, he shall descend upon Egypt. The gods of Egypt shall quail before him," end quote. Isaiah also claimed to have personally seen the Lord and his winged attendants. Quote, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I beheld and saw the Lord seated upon a high and raised up throne. Its lifters filled up the great house. The fire attendants were stationed above it, 6 wings to each of them. The threshold beams were shaken by the sound, and the house was filled with smoke." End quote. The Hebrews were forbidden to worship and therefore to make statues or engraved images. But the Canaanites, who must have known of Yahweh as the Hebrews had known of Baal, left us a depiction of Yahweh as conceived by them. A 4th century BC coin which bears the inscription Yahu, or Yahweh, depicts a bearded deity seated upon a throne shaped as a winged wheel. Figure 88. I'll show you figure 88 right now. So there he is, sitting on a winged wheel. It was thus universally assumed in the ancient Near East that lordship over Zaphon established the supremacy among the gods who could fly about. Thus, this, no doubt, was what Baal had expected. But 7 years after the fastness of Zaphon was completed, Baal faced a challenge by Mot, lord of the southern lands and the lower world. As it turned out, the dispute was no longer about the mastery of Zaphon. Rather, it had to do with, quote, "who over the whole earth dominion shall have," end quote. Word somehow reached Mot that Baal was engaged in suspicious activities. Unlawfully and clandestinely, he was, quote, "putting one lip to earth and one lip to heaven," end quote, and was attempting to, quote, "stretch his speech to the planets," end quote. Mot at first demanded the right to inspect the goings-on within the crest of Zaphon. Instead, Baal sent emissaries with messages of peace. "Who needs war?" he asked. "Let us, quote, pour peace and amity into the center of earth," end quote. As Mot became more persistent, Baal concluded that the only way to prevent Mot from coming to Zaphon was for Baal to go to Mot's abode. So he journeyed to Mot's pit in the depths of the earth, professing obedience. Yet what he really had in mind was something more sinister, the overthrow of Mot. For that he needed the help of the ever-faithful Anat. And so it was that while Baal was gone to Mot, his emissaries reached Anat at her own abode. The 2 emissaries were instructed to repeat to Anat, word for word, an enigmatic message. Quote, "I have a word of secret to tell thee, a message to whisper unto thee. It is a contraption that launches words, a stone that whispers. Men its messages will not know, earth's multitudes will not comprehend." End quote. Stones in the ancient languages, we must bear in mind, encompassed all quarried or mined substances, and thus included all minerals and metals. Not therefore readily understood what Baal was telling her. He was setting up upon the crest of Zaphon some sophisticated contraption that could send or intercept secret messages. The stone of splendor was further described in the secret message. Quote, Heaven with earth it makes converse, and the seas with the planets. It is a stone of splendor. To heaven it is yet unknown. Let's you and I raise it within my cavern on lofty Zaphon. End quote. So that was the secret. Baal, without the knowledge of heaven, the government of the home planet, was setting up a clandestine communication center for which he could converse with all the parts of Earth, as well as with the spacecraft above Earth. It was a first step to, quote, over the whole Earth dominion to have, end quote. In that, he ran into direct conflict with Mot, for it was in Mot's territories that the official, quote-unquote, eye of Earth was located. Having received and understood the message, Anat readily agreed to go to Baal's aid. The worried emissaries were promised that she would be there on time. Quote, You are slow, I am swift, end quote, she assured them. Quote, The god's distant place I will penetrate, the distant hollow of the sons of the gods. 2 openings it has under the eye of earth, and 3 wide tunnels, end quote. Arriving at Mot's capital, she could not find Baal. Demanding to know his whereabouts, she threatened Mot with violence. Finally, she learnt the truth. The 2 gods had engaged in hand combat, and Baal was fallen. Enraged, she, quote, with a sword cleaved Mot, end quote. Then, with the aid of Shepesh, mistress of Raphaim, the healers, the lifeless body of Baal was flown back to the peak of Zaphon and placed in a cavern. Quickly, the 2 goddesses summoned the craftsman of the gods, also referred to as El Kasem, the god of magic. As Thoth had revived the snake-bitten Horus, so was Baal miraculously resurrected. But whether he was resurrected physically on earth or in a celestial afterlife as Osiris, one cannot be certain. When did the gods act out these events upon the crest of Zaphon? No one can say for sure, but we do know that mankind was cognizant of the existence and unique attributes of the landing place almost from the beginning of recorded history. We have to begin... hold on, pause for just a second. Okay, we've got a few pages left here. We have to begin with the journey of Gilgamesh to the Cedar Mountain, which his epic also calls a, quote, abode of the gods, the crossroads of Ishtar, end quote. There, pressing into the forest, he came upon a tunnel which led to, quote, the enclosure from which words of command are issued, end quote. Proceeding deeper into the mountain, the, quote, the secret abode of the Anunnaki he opened up, end quote. It is as though Gilgamesh had penetrated the very installations which Baal had secretly constructed. Mystery-filled verses in the epic now assume a thrilling meaningfulness. Quote, secret things he has seen, what is hidden from man he knows, end quote. This, we know, took place in the 3rd millennium BC, circa 2900 BC. The next link between the affairs of gods and men is the tale of the aging and airless Danel, who had resided somewhere near Kadesh. There is no time frame given for the tale's occurrences, but the similarities with the biblical tale of the airless Abraham, including the sudden appearance of men who turn out to be the Lord and his emissaries, and the locale not far from Kadesh, suggest the possibility that we are reading 2 versions of the same ancestral memory. If so, we have another date mark, the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC. Zaphon was still there, a fastness of the gods, in the 1st millennium BC. The prophet Isaiah, 8th century BC, castigated the Assyrian invader of Judea, Sennacherib, for having insulted the Lord by ascending with his many chariots, quote, to the mountain's height unto the crest of Zaphon, end quote. Stressing the antiquity of the place, the prophet transmitted to Sennacherib the Lord's admonition, quote, "Hast thou not heard it? Long ago have I made it. In days of old have I created it." End quote. The same prophet likewise castigated the king of Babylon for having attempted to deify himself by scaling the crest of Zaphon. Quote, "O how fallen from heaven art thou, a morning star, son of dawn! Felled to the ground is he who the nations enfeebled. Thou didst say in thine heart, I will ascend unto the heavens. Above the planets of El I shall raise my throne. On the mount of assembly I shall sit, on the crest of Zaphon. Upon the raised platform I shall go up, a lofty one I shall be. But nay, to the nether world you shalt go, down to the depths of a pit." End quote. We have here not only confirmation of the existence of the place and its antiquity, but also the description of it. It included a raised platform from which one could ascend heavenward and become a lofty one, a god. The ascent heavenward, we know from other biblical writings, was by means of stones, mechanical contraptions, that could travel. In the 6th century BC, the prophet Ezekiel castigated the king of Tyre, whose heart grew haughty after he had been permitted to reach the crest of Zaphon, and was taken within the, quote, moving stones, end quote, an experience after which he claimed, quote unquote, "a god am I." An ancient coin found at Byblos, the biblical Gebel, one of the Canaanite Phoenician cities on the Mediterranean coast, may well have illustrated the structures erected upon Zaphon by Cotharhassus, figure 89. It depicts a great house adjoined by a raised area, which is surrounded by a high and massive wall. There, upon a podium supported by cross beams, built to withstand a great weight, there is mounted a conical object, an object familiar from so many other Near Eastern depictions, the celestial chamber of the gods, the moving stone. Okay, so here we are for that coin. The great house, the raised platform, and the conical object. This, then, is the evidence bequeathed to us from antiquity. Millennium after millennium, the peoples of the ancient Near East were aware that within the Cedar Mountain there was a large platform for moving stones, quote unquote, adjoined by a great house within which "a stone that whispers" was secreted. And if we have been right in our interpretations of ancient texts and drawings, could it be that this grand and known place has vanished? And that is the end of that chapter. So I was not as far into it as I thought I was last night. But that's okay. We are now at chapter 9, the landing place, and we'll pick that up on the Tuesday read, barring any disaster like not having sound again. So I will see you all in that reading.